Hello everyone! I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today we are going to talk about the true cost of publishing a novel. So this video specifically talks about if you are going to go the route of self-publishing your novel. Some of this does kind of apply to if you are traditionally publishing your novel, but most of that cost is going to be covered by the publisher itself. This may or may not be helpful to you, but this is definitely something that you need to know if you are going the route of self-publishing. So obviously we're going with the idea of that this is your manuscript and you wrote it yourself, because ghostwriting is a whole other type of expense, and I'm not going to cover that in this video because that's not what this video is about. So we're going to pretend you have written a full manuscript yourself and you have either edited none of it or you have edited it yourself. And I do recommend, and this is one of the costs, this will probably be the first cost that you encounter as an author, is hiring an editor. And it's really important, especially if you're new at writing and being a part of this industry, is to hire an editor. And this is not just for like finding your silly typos and things like that. There are different kinds of editors. There are line editors where they are meant to like catch your typos and see if you're saying a word too many times in a row and things like that, the really nitty-gritty of it. But there are also editors that do things like they go over your story and they make sure that it makes sense. Do you have any plot holes? Do the characters make sense? Does the overall story arc make sense? Are you missing things in the story? Is there stuff that you need to explain better? Those kind of things. There's that kind of editor. And then there's also editors that specialize in things like, let's say you're writing historical fiction and you need somebody who, in addition to being an editor, is kind of like a fact checker person. That you need somebody with that added perspective of making sure that what you're writing is accurate. So there's that kind of editor. There's several different levels of what kinds of editors that you can hire to look at your piece. And if you can't afford to hire an editor, at the very least, it's a really good idea to either become a part of a local writer's workshop or an online writer's workshop where you can work with other people to critique your piece and get feedback about it. Or if you have some friends or you know some people in the writing community who are willing to beta read your book, do that. Having some sort of outside input on your book is really, really helpful, especially if you're first starting out, because one of the things that I personally know is that's a consistent problem with my writing process is that I have trouble getting it all on the page. And what this means is that I know the whole story, I know what's happening, but I haven't necessarily taken that out of my head and actually written it into the manuscript. And so that's a thing that I need an outside person for my writing, is to look at it and make sure that I didn't forget things in the story. Like, is there a gap in what's supposed to be happening? Or have I just completely glossed over a certain point in the story? Or have we just completely jumped somewhere else? Like, things like that. That's what I personally need an outside person to do for my stories. Other people have different things that they commonly have issues with in their writing. And one of the best pieces of advice that I have found is actually my mentor, Tina Jen, said this, and I think that it is so fantastically true, is if you are lucky enough to be a person who is part of a workshop or some sort of critiquing community, oftentimes, if something is a pet peeve of yours where you're like, wow, I really hate it when people make this particular mistake in their writing, it's probably your mistake. It's probably like that's your thing that you struggle with. And so when you see it in other people's writing, you're like, oh my God, I hate this. Keep that in mind. If you find yourself being like, wow, this particular thing is really annoying when people mess that up in stories, do a little bit of soul searching and you might find that that's your thing that you struggle with. And when I say your thing, I mean that every author has a particular part of the process that they struggle with. Whether you're like me and you have a hard time making sure that everything's on the page and not just up in your head, Or some people really struggle with point of view. Sometimes people bounce around between different points of view and they have trouble staying in one point of view. They'll switch from first person to third person, or they'll like head jump around way too much in the different characters. Or there are some people where they really have trouble with writing dialogue and it just sounds like stilted robots talking. Or some people have a really hard time with describing where they are, that they have a really hard time describing, what does the environment look like? What do the characters look like? What is anything that's going on in the outside world? The list goes on. Everybody has one particular thing that they like notoriously are like, this is my problem that I know is going to crop up in every single manuscript that I write. And I need an outside person to check me and be like, hey, you're doing the thing again. That's probably the first expense that you're going to incur, is having an outside person look at your manuscript and give you feedback on it. The next expense that you're going to have is the process of making your book into a book. And all of this, we haven't even touched actually publishing your book yet. This all comes before that. So the next step is the cover artist and the layout artist. And these kind of go hand in hand. You're going to do these two like probably about at the same time. This is another expense that you're going to incur, is whether it's you hire a cover artist to design your cover for you, or you buy a stock image to use for your cover, or if you use some sort of service, whether, there's like these services where you have templates and you can kind of put it together yourself, but they have like a library of images that you can use and put together in different fonts that you can use and play with to create your own cover. But it's like a full like kind of library service for you to utilize to design your cover yourself. Whatever of those paths that you choose are going to cost you money. The only way to get around not having to shell out money for designing your cover is if you do it yourself. I highly recommend that unless you are an artist like I am, like I designed the covers for Geisha Hands and Pandora and Synesthesia Fables myself. I drew them myself. Unless you are like at this caliber of doing it, I don't recommend doing it, because this is a corner that I see a lot of people cut, where they try to do it themselves and they know they're not a good artist, or they try to use a free image that they save off of Google image search and then they find out later that it was copyrighted, or they don't have the right usage rights for it, or whatever. There are just so many mistakes you can make with selecting cover art. And I have another video where I specifically talk all about cover art. So please go watch that video, because there are so many mistakes that you can make, and your cover is such an important part of your novel. It's the first thing people are going to see. That is like the number one make it or break it of people deciding if they want to read your book or not, is what does the cover look like. So definitely invest in your cover art, whatever route you decide to go with it. With layout, again, this is a thing that you could technically do yourself, but if you don't know what you're doing, you should probably just hire someone to do it for you. And what layout is it means taking your manuscript out of Microsoft Word or Scrivener, whatever word processing thing it is you use, and putting it into the formatting of an actual book. So this means having to lay out the type on the page and having to figure out stuff like, okay, this right here, this is called the gutter. This is where the two pages meet each other. And this is important because you can't have your words too close to the gutter, otherwise it's going to be hard to read. And also the edges of the page, like this white space that's all around the edges of the book. You want to make sure your text is not too close to the edge of the page, because again, it's hard to read. You need to take into consideration, what kind of font are you using? What size is the font? What is the spacing of everything? What's the spacing between paragraphs? What is the spacing that you're going to use on the page? With how much white space do you want to have? All of that you have to take into consideration for laying out the book to make sure that it's readable. You also need to take into consideration things like what's called widows and orphans. And what that means is, do you have one single word that's just hanging out on the bottom of a page, or one single word that's just kind of hanging out on the top of the next page? page. That's even worse. All that kind of stuff. Figuring out how do the words go on the page. I know how stupid, obvious that sounds, but it's actually a really difficult thing to do, and there's a lot that you need to know and a lot that goes into it in order to do it at a professional level. Personally, Brian used to do all the book layout for me because he actually is experienced in all of that. And the program that he would use is an Adobe Suite program called InDesign. That's what InDesign is for. It's for laying out books and magazines. But laying out books takes a long time, y'all. Especially some of my books, like Freya's Baby is one of the longest books I've ever written. It's about 600 pages. Can you imagine sitting there laying out individually 600 pages worth of text? That's a lot. That's a lot to ask of anybody. And thank you, Brian, for doing it. I know it was a pain, and I'm sorry. With the start of Succumb to Darkness, we have started hiring a person to do the layout for us because it's so much to do. And that means that's less stuff that we have to do ourselves. And so we utilize a service. We have a particular person through this service that we use that now lays out my books for me. We pay her. She's wonderful. We love her. Yay. And that just takes so much off of my plate. So I can just hand off my manuscript, la la la, and she worries about it for me. And Brian doesn't have to deal with my nonsense anymore. And he's free to do whatever he wants to do. Everybody wins. This is going to be the next expense that you probably incur because unless you really have the time to learn InDesign and learn book layout and all that, you're probably better served just turning it over to a professional and letting them do it for you. And through all of this is another topic that I talk about in my video about how exactly to go about getting cover art for your novel, is pricing. So of course, pricing is going to vary depending on what you need and what level of expertise that you need, how much effort is going to go into what you want somebody to do and all of that. So like, again, with what kind of editor are you hiring? What are they editing? What level of expertise do you need? How many pages is your book? How in-depth of a job do you need them to do? Do they just need to read over the book and tell you it's good or it sucks? Do you need them to do line editing? Like, all of that impacts pricing. Same with the cover art. How in-depth do you need this to be? Do you need to just buy a $50 image off of iStock? Or do you need somebody to do an in-depth art commission where you get so serious that you tell them about exactly what color the lace is on their dress and what color their eyes are? All of that affects the price. Same with the layout. Do you have a 600-page book that you have to have laid out, or do you have a nice, short, snappy little novella that's being laid out? All of that impacts the price. And that's why it's important to make sure that you do research, and it's so important to become a part of your local writing community or become a part of an online writing community, because a lot of the people in the industry can point you to reputable people and reputable services to make sure that you're not being ripped off. Because there are unfortunately a lot of people that will prey on hopeful authors and either charge you insane amounts of money for things that do not cost that much money, or they'll just straight up take your money and give you nothing. So make sure that you are doing your research before handing over your money and know what exactly you're asking for, what exactly you're getting, and the value of that. I talk about this way more in depth in my video about cover art, and honestly, the same thing can be applied to everything that I'm talking about here, is that none of this should cost tens of thousands of dollars. Just first and foremost, just no. I don't know why I keep seeing that with people complaining that editors and cover artists and layout artists and all this other stuff cost them tens of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, who the are you hiring? Why? No. Just no. If someone says it's going to cost you $40,000 for literally any of the above, just the answer is no. No. All of these things can cost anywhere from like $50 to maybe $1,000, depending on how crazy you need to get with something, maybe like $2,000. More than that, I really need to know why it costs that much money, because it just really shouldn't. Make sure that you're doing your research. Make sure that you're going through someone who's reputable, and make sure you know the value of what you're asking for and what you're getting, because I've just seen outrageous numbers for these services and just no. The next thing that people don't really think about when going through the self-publishing process is the IBN code. And you may ask, what is that? It's this code right here. When you go to like a Barnes and Noble and you see like the little barcode thing that they use to scan the book so that you can pay at the cash register, that's what the IBN code is. It is the universal code that if your book gets picked up by a bookstore like Barnes and Noble, or if it gets inducted into a library, they're able to catalog it into their system by using this. And you can get them through Amazon. And depending on what exactly you need for the IBN code and what exactly Amazon's standards are for the type of book that you're doing, that may cost you some sort of fee. But it's not an enormous fee. It's not a fee that you have to like repeatedly pay for like on a yearly basis or anything like that. It's a one and done thing. So unless you need to, I don't know, completely change your book or something, then you have to get a new IBN code. But other than that, it's one and done. Another expense that you might incur during this whole process of getting your book ready to be published, whether it's on Amazon or Ingram or whatever service that you want to use. Some authors will go and get their book copyright registered. And in order to do this, you need the full completed manuscript to send that in, and you have to pay a fee, and the fee is dependent on where you live. So each state has their own different fee and their own different process for this. Living in Illinois, it was very easy. I just had to do it online, and I emailed it, and I sent the fee, and it was all very easy online. Didn't take me very long. And then they snail mailed me the little certificate to be like, yay, it's copyrighted. You're welcome. You also have the option of you can also pay a fee to have it enrolled in the Library of Congress if that's something that you want to do. I did that for Love of the Sea. That's totally something you can do. It does cost a fee, but then it's in the Library of Congress forever. Hooray. So those are two kind of like extra things that you can do as an author if you have the money and the wherewithal that you feel like you should do that. It is recommended that you do copyright your books, but it is not required in order for them to be published, self-published anyway. And part of why you would want to do this is it just helps protect you, especially if you like, make it big as an author or whatever, that if you come against any sort of legal trouble or, people trying to like steal your book or misrepresent your book or whatever, you have the copyright and that'll help you in court with any sort of piracy issues and stuff like that. It's just kind of like a cover your butt legal sort of thing. Good to have, but not exactly something that's like required in order to get your book self-published. And after you have done all these things and incurred all of these fees and payments for getting your book all put together, it's time to make it be a book. So then you submit it to Ingram or Amazon or wherever it is that you're going to make it a book through. And depending on what service you use, they might have fees that you have to pay for whatever reason. Amazon does not have a fee that you have to pay in order to self-publish a book on their website. So if you want to go that route, there's that. You don't have any upfront cost with just the act of publishing the book. It's you just click a button and boop, it's magically in the world now. Congratulations. Hooray. And once it becomes a book, a thing that I highly recommend is that you are going to want to have physical copies. So unless this is an ebook only situation, you have it available in at least paperback, you're going to want to have books as inventory for yourself. Whether this is purely to just have as physical props to take with you to events and panels to show off to people, or if you want to go the whole shebang route like I do, where you actually have a booth and you set up and you sell your books, you need to understand that that's going to be an upfront cost, is buying your books wholesale from whatever service it is you're using. That costs something. And then it is up to you to then sell them, to basically price them at whatever price it is that you decide so that you can then make a profit. If for whatever reason you decide to price them at a price where you don't make a profit, that's up to you. If you just want to give them away, that's up to you, whatever you want to do. But actually getting in possession of physical copies of your books is going to cost you. And even working with a publisher, if you want to have your own inventory to frolic around at your own events and your own conventions and stuff like that, is going to cost you. Publishers will typically give you a certain amount of authors' copies of the books. But if you want to have like an actual inventory of books to sell yourself, you are going to have to pay them the wholesale cost of that book, because at the end of the day, the publisher still needs to make money. They're not going to give you a whole bunch of copies of your book for free for you to be able to sell for 100% profit. That's not a thing. So yeah, so there's cost with that, with just obtaining physical copies of your book, whether it's for you, for showing off, for selling, whatever. It's going to cost you whatever wholesale and shipping is. So keep that in mind with your expenses. And then of course, the whole frontier of marketing costs money. And there's so many different options that you can do. Some cost you $0, some cost you lots of dollars. If you hire a publicist, obviously that costs you a good amount of money. And that's a person that you have to like pay regularly. That's not a one and done. That's a recurring fee. You're paying somebody for a service. Same with if you decide to hire somebody as a social media manager. That's a fee, recurring fee, hiring somebody as a service. And then if you want to run any sort of ads, so whether it's Facebook ads, Instagram ads, Twitter ads, Amazon ads, YouTube ads, whatever kind of advertising, that's going to cost you a fee. What's nice with a lot of different social media type of ads is that you can set a budget. You can say, I only want to spend X amount. And then they'll be like, okay, the ad will just run until it has spent your maximum amount of money, and then it's done. The ad is over, hooray. And that I highly recommend, especially for new authors, is you would be surprised at how much you can make happen for like $20 with a well-placed social media ad. Amazon ads are far more complicated. Me and Brian are currently in the process right now of researching them and figuring them out. But what's nice about Amazon ads is that you only have to pay if people actually click on the ad. If you can get, like, we got like thousands of, they're called impressions, which basically just means people saw the ad. But until somebody actually clicks on it, you don't have to pay anything. So you could get thousands of people looking at your ad, and if they don't click on it, you don't pay anything. And with the other social media ads, they run as, okay, I want to pay $10 a day for 5 days for a total of $50. I want to target these audiences, ready, set, go. And then the ad will run, and it'll budget it out like that, where at the end, it'll run for day one, and once it hits $10, it'll stop for the day. And then day two, it'll do the same thing, and it'll just run like that until it gets to your set amount of 50. Understanding how the paid ad options on different social media platforms and on Amazon is really helpful, and just working smarter, not harder with those. You don't have to throw tons and tons of money at these ads in order to have success from them. You just have to understand how they work, and you have to understand who your audience is and how to target them. That is the key for making sure that you get the most out of the money that you're putting into that ad. So make sure that you're not just throwing money around at these ads, because likely you're not going to target the people that you need to target, and you're not going to make any sales. So make sure that you do your research, make sure you know who your actual audience is for your book, and how to best reach them when doing those sorts of ads. And the last thing that you could potentially spend money on is an advertising service. So what I mean by this is, for example, I use a service called BookBrush. This is extremely helpful as an author to have in order to create content for your social media, so that you have all this stuff that you can post on a regular basis and it looks professional. And just to note, I am not sponsored by BookBrush. They did not pay me to say any of this. It is a service that I personally use and pay for, and I just think that it works really awesome. There are other services comparable to BookBrush out there. You're more than free to check them out. This is just my experience with this particular service. So, disclaimer over. With this service, what it does is it gives you templates for both photo and video content. So it has a library of all of these different images that you can use, and what's so unique and cool about it, and has just like helped me so much with my social media strategy, is that you also upload high resolution images of your book cover. and then it automatically puts your book cover in the content image, which is just so cool. And it does it seamlessly. Like, it looks like it's like a real picture with your book in it. So we're talking like images where it'll be a table and there's some coffee and maybe some reading glasses and a person's hands holding a book, but like in the actual template thing, the book part is just blank, it's white. But then once it does its magic and it plugs it in, it'll plug in your book cover there, so it'll look like somebody is holding your book sitting at a table with coffee and reading glasses and stuff. So there's just tons of these images that you can just just plug and play your book covers into. You don't actually have to do anything. You just upload your book covers, you select which one you want to use, and it just automatically does it. It's just boom, done. Download it, post it. Awesome. And it also does this with the video content in that it lets you create these cute little short commercials for your book. So it'll have these little stock video clips and some stock like music that you can put, and you can put like some text to go with it. And then the end part of the video, it'll again have that template where it'll have like a physical book and then also like a Kindle reader, and you just plug and play your book cover into that, and it's boom, just there's the book. And it's amazing. And I, for several years, did all of this myself, where I actually sat in Photoshop myself and would take my book covers and Photoshop them into these images that I would graphic design myself with like all the text and everything all formatted. I had to do all of that from scratch myself. And so I would have to do all of this myself from scratch. But now I have this service where I just plug and play my images, and in only like a couple of hours, I'm able to create the same amount of content for the entire month of posting that used to take me like several days to put together. And I couldn't create as many, like this variety of content to have to post that I can now. So I know this sounds really salesy, and I'm not trying to sell this to anybody. This was just a game changer for me with my marketing strategy. It has helped so much. My content just looks so much more polished and professional, and it means that I spend less time creating all this content so that I can then spend more time actually writing. And that's the biggest thing, is definitely make sure that you're investing in things that are going to make your life as the author easier. The less time and effort that you have to spend on all of the other crap so that you can spend more time on your writing is so worth it. And the other piece of that is that I personally use the program Hootsuite. It's a posting service where basically you plug in all of your social media handles in there, and you can schedule out all your posts, and it just does it for you. So I do that every month, where at the beginning of the month, I sit down and I schedule out all of my content for the month. So yeah, I do post on a regular basis, like manually myself, but there's also content that's like automatically posted for me, so that at the very least, even if I don't do any marketing that day, it's still working in the background, putting out content so that my stuff stays relevant, and so that there's still stuff for people to interact with and look at, so that I don't just have an account that's just sitting there doing nothing for like a week or a month or whatever. It's just taken so much more time from my day that I don't have to do anymore. That I don't have to remember every day, oh no, it's whatever o'clock, I have to make a post. Oh no, I have to make another post. I don't have to do that anymore. It just does it for me. So the fact that I have a service that creates the content for me, and then I have a service that posts the content for me, just saves me so much time and effort as the author, so that I can actually sit here and write things for y'all. And so this is a big part of why it's frustrating for me when I see these authors that complain about how expensive it is to do this whole process, about how expensive it is and how much work it is and to do marketing of your book and all that. And well, it all depends on what your financial situation is, and it also depends on how much you're willing to do yourself and how much time you're willing to dedicate to doing it yourself. And when I was first starting out, I couldn't afford those services. I've only recently been able to afford these services. I had to do everything myself. I had to scrimp and save just to even attend the events and conventions that I did. I used to live in poverty, y'all. Like, I've been there. I know how much of a struggle it is, and I know how much it sucks to have to do everything yourself. I know that. And I can guarantee you that if you're financially capable of taking some of that stuff off your plate, or at the very least having somebody who can do stuff in a professional capacity, have them do it. Pay someone else to do it. Pay a service to do a thing for you. Because at the end of the day, you are an author. You are here to write and share stories. That is your primary objective. And so if you have the capability to hand off all this extra hoopla to someone else or a service, like, do it. Absolutely do it. And I know a lot of y'all are going to say, why pay for it when I can do it myself? And this is excluding the people that can't afford, okay? So if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, and there's no way around that. And if you're in that category, I am so sorry. It sucks. I've been there, okay? I know what that feels like. I've been there. But for the people who can afford it and just don't want to shell out, like, that's your prerogative and that's your right. But also, I have seen this time and time again where people will, for instance, do their book cover themselves and it looks like crap. And then they're mad that nobody's buying their book. Or they don't hire an editor and their book is a mess. And then they wonder why people are leaving them bad reviews. Or people are just like, what's book layout? And just literally throw a PDF on Amazon or Ingram or whatever. And then when they actually go to print the book, it's a mess and again, looks like crap. And then they wonder, why are people leaving them bad reviews? That's why. And I am not discrediting. There's absolutely value in learning how to do these things yourself. I am not discouraging anybody from doing that. The problem is that people think that it's not that hard to do these things and they do it in a very sloppy way. And then they wonder, why have the consequences of my actions come back to face me? So if you want your book to be professional and you want people to take you seriously and you want people to buy your book and leave you nice reviews, you need to present them with a professional book. So whether that's you sit and you take the time to learn how to do it yourself at a professional capacity, or you just pay somebody else to do it, whichever you want to do is up to you. But I am specifically saying to the people who think that they can just put together whatever with very little thought or effort, you can't be mad at the consequences that follow. And I just see that far too often in the community. And I hope y'all have found this video helpful. I have been trying very hard to educate people in the community on this, that there really is value in investing in your book. Because the last thought that I want to leave y'all with is, if you're not willing to invest in your book, why do you expect people to pay to read your book? Just my thoughts on the subject. So I hope y'all found this helpful. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.